Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in Season 4 of the People in Fundraising Weekly Nonprofit Podcast. Today is Wednesday, June 18th, 2025, and I'm really excited to welcome today's guest, Frankie Frederick, to our program. Good afternoon, Frankie.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm
Good.
excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk with you. And before we get into your introduction, which I'm delighted to have you give our audience, did want to acknowledge that a previous People in Fundraising guest, Michelle Flores Vryn, connected Frankie to me and recommended her highly. So I'm excited to learn about you and your company and what you're doing in the social impact space. So anything you would like to tell our audience about yourself at this point, Frankie?
Yeah, happy to. So I am the CEO and co-founder of Grantyd, a grant automation solution. That's Grantyd with a Y, Grantyd. And you can find us at grantyd.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn at Francesca Axam Frederick. Yeah, and Grantyd is also on LinkedIn, so you can find me through that.
Oh, terrific. So people can follow Grantyd as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, very good. I'm really excited to get to that point in the conversation. What we always do with guests is a quick discussion or share about your career journey, how you entered the fundraising profession, and then we'll get to the exciting news about your company.
Yeah, so I entered the fundraising profession through my first love, which was dance. My mother was a dancer, my aunt was a dancer. I grew up dancing in Atlanta, where I'm from, and I went to the Boston Conservatory and studied dance performance. That was the goal. And I found myself falling in love with supporting the arts and not being a performer. And from there, from college, I graduated and I ended up going to an internship that changed my life at Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival, where I
Oh,
was completely blown away by the administrative side of supporting the arts. And from there, I went to New York and started my career working in arts nonprofits. And it's taken off ever since. And I've been fundraising and supporting nonprofits across different sectors since then.
wonderful. I'm really curious, Frankie, if you can describe more about how you went from the performance side of art, in this case, performance and dance, to understanding and realizing that the operational side that supports the performance would be something very intriguing for you.
Well, I actually, it started when I was working in the box office at the Boston Conservatory. It's now the Boston Conservatory at Berklee. And I would find myself performing in a show and then, ending my piece, my dance, and running back to help with tickets or help manage the house. And so I found myself enjoying the administrative part more. And I realized I didn't really love performing. I loved dance, but I didn't really love performing. But I loved supporting dance and supporting the arts. And I loved the administrative ins and outs. And I loved talking to patrons. I
Mm.
loved learning why they love dance. And I remember that was actually one of my favorite things at Jacob's Pillow is all the different patrons that came through to see these wonderful dance organizations, these wonderful companies, and getting to know their story, why they supported the arts, made me realize why I loved the arts, and it just became this kind of new world for me. And I still love dance to this day, but I think it was really the realization that performing wasn't something for me. But it was the community around the arts that I loved and around supporting the arts and less of the performance on stage.
I see. Okay. That's a great answer. Thank you. And so walk us through, you mentioned New York City and Atlanta. Have you held I try not to do too much research on guests because that sometimes can freak people out. I want it to be more of a natural conversation. So did you hold institutional roles? Did you do consulting? How did you get what's the bridge from Boston Conservatory at Berklee to Grantyd, and then we'll get into the Grantyd phase.
Yeah. So after I graduated, like I said, I did that amazing internship. And from there, I actually got my first job at Manhattan School of Music, where I managed all of their events, which they had thousands actually. It's a huge music institution and it was fantastic. And then I picked up grant writing on the side for small arts nonprofits and dancers. So I was writing grants on the side for individual artists and small dance companies. I then went on to be in the museum space and I was working at the Paley Center for Media where I managed their entire front of house operations as well as their individual donors. So all of our individual gifts. And was still grant writing on the side for
Yeah.
small arts organizations and individual artists, primarily in dance. There were a few not in dance, but they were primarily in dance. And I was at Paley for a long time and through the pandemic. And then we got pregnant with me and my husband got pregnant with our second child. And so we decided to move back to Atlanta, where I'm from. And I was like, okay, there's actually not as many arts organizations in Atlanta, specifically performing arts. So that kind of individual donor, front of house, it was hard for me to lean in there. And so I was like, okay, let me lean into my institutional advancement side. I've been grant writing now for smaller artists for, about 8 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
And so I took a job at Atlanta Ballet doing institutional advancement there. And I was the director of institutional giving there, grant writing for them.
Okay.
And from there, I went to be the director of development at Covenant House, Georgia, where I was managing more of major gifts, individual gifts, events, peer-to-peer fundraising, and some grants. And then from there, I went to Clark Atlanta University, where I honed in on major gifts and individual giving.
Okay.
Mind you, this whole time, I'm still grant writing on the side for small artists. So I never let go of, that grassroots grant writing work, specifically in the dance community and the theater community. I
Mhm.
still held on to that. And it was actually while I was writing a grant for a small theater nonprofit in Atlanta, because I was also on the law school track at the time, while also working at Clark Atlanta University,
Wow.
while also having two toddlers. And I was writing this grant, and my husband had just been part of the Google layoffs, and he was poking his nose in everything I was doing. So how I did the laundry, how I did my job. And he saw me writing this grant and he was like, "Why are you writing it like that?" And I was like, "Well, this is how we write grants. This is how I've always written grants. This is how we write grants." And so he actually built the tool just for me to use. He was actually working on a completely different startup idea for tutors, and he could built the tool for me to use because I was clearly someone that couldn't streamline my workflow or let go of any of the things I was working on. And at that time, law school was the big fish. That was the main focus. That was the goal. But I didn't want to let go of the clients that I had. So he
Yeah.
built me this tool and I used it for about 6 months before we decided to take it to market because it really did streamline my workload that much. And I actually quit the law school track. He quit his other startup. I let go of Clark Atlanta. I did keep some of my side consulting, but that's because I was able to do the work so much faster. Yeah.
Sure. That is so exciting. That is great. And just, I mean, it's easy for me to say hearing a little bit about the origin story, but how incredible that it takes literally the marriage of your passion and your grant writing with your husband's technical prowess to come together, and now
Yeah.
you've launched Grantyd. And when did Grantyd launch, Frankie?
So it launched about 15 days ago. It launched at the
Hmm.
top of June. So we are still very new. We're still very fresh. And then we are launching a second it's the same under the Grantyd umbrella, but a second tool which helps leverage finding funders, which will be a dashboard. So we have the tool that helps you streamline proposals through auto population, which leverages a Chrome extension and a web extension. And then we have a secondary tool, which is a dashboard that helps you find funders.
Holy cow, that's so cool. And so 15 days in, what has been the response you've seen either on LinkedIn or in your network or anything you want to share with us, please?
Yeah, the response has been great. I think this is, these types of tools that streamline workflow and also democratize the space for small nonprofits, for grassroots orgs, was really needed. Tech in the nonprofit sector can be really expensive, and there are so many nonprofit organizations or community organizations that don't have large fundraising teams,
Yeah.
and it's hard for them to get ahead. And so Grantyd came out, and our pricing model ranges from free, we have a free tier, a $20 tier, and then we will launch our discovery platform at $30 a month. And that
Wow.
is so we can actually, so small nonprofits, individuals, grassroots organizations, community organizations can get ahead, can find funding um, without eating into their budget. And
Right.
it's really hard for the organizations 500K below, even a million and below, to get ahead when they don't have the financial means to buy all these different tech tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point and very interesting. I was at my one of my kids' baseball games last night. My oldest child was talking about how she had been involved in some fundraising for the high school, and they were doing a partnership with um, a high school for children with special needs, and how like the high school students having to help the staff at the special needs school. And it's like, oh, we can do a 5K and raise some money. And so I was like, man, like I don't know much about grant writing or but as I'm listening to you talk, that school Vista here in northern Utah came to mind. Um, but I think that the price point you mentioned is remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, and because it really is about, getting ahead. If you look at people who seek funding, oftentimes they either don't have the nonprofit or fundraising background, so there's someone who happens to apply for grants, but they don't consider themselves a grant writer or fundraiser. So
Yeah.
they're not receiving the same even tools that fundraisers receive in the field. They're not getting the same tactics, they're not getting the same conversations, they're not in the same rooms.
Yeah.
And so they're left out of those conversations when it comes to new tech, when it comes to how to engage funders. And so how do we bridge that gap? How do we not leave them behind? I mean, and even our tool has the option to leverage AI. You don't have to use AI. But even AI is a big thing where, I've talked to some people in the fundraising space who say, if a nonprofit isn't ready to, incorporate AI, we're leaving them behind. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but when you do that, you leave the people they serve behind.
Yes.
So when we don't provide affordable models for tech, when we don't, bring everyone to the table to have a conversation about how tech can benefit them or how they're scared of tech or, just give them a space to voice their opinions, we're not doing our communities at large any good service. We're not doing the work. And so really we built this product to, do the work for nonprofits and for teams that don't necessarily have the same fundraising capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I want to skip, just 'cause I feel like there's a good connection here with what you were just talking about. When you posted on LinkedIn about Grantyd and a post around the time I put this questionnaire together, you wrote that you, quote, wanted to revolutionize grant proposal management and how you saw that as a real need in the nonprofit world. So if you can please just tell our audience, what was the process like going from concept to launching? And then we'll go back to that second question, because I think you just mentioned the word community, and I want to tie that into that question. So jumping around a little bit, I hope that's okay.
It was interesting because it took some, transitions. It initially started when we created the product just for me to use. I was kind of operating in a vacuum as a grant writer. I was writing for small nonprofits that I had written for a long time. And so it was just a Chrome extension in the grant application, and you would put your documents in and it would populate the grant right then and there. I had not grant written in a I had not done any grant writing in a nonprofit organization with a team in a while. And so we actually decided to, obviously, once we decided to take to market, we are like, okay, we need to survey writers across the sector.
Yeah.
People who happen to write grants but don't consider themselves grant writers on huge teams, different nonprofit sizes, different, varying verticals, whether that be education, religion, wherever they stood. And so we did kind of this broad survey of different grant writers, and we actually had them take us, not even just survey, how do you feel about this? What do you like about this? No, we had them walk us through their process step by step.
Wow.
We also wanted to see like where their face scrunched up, where their body tensed up, what part of the process bothered them, where was the actual bottleneck, so we can actually fix that. Because you'll come across so many people who'll say, oh, I hate writing grants. And you're like, okay, but why? Let's get to the why. And then you'll come across a lot of people who'll say this, and this is my favorite. Surprisingly, I love writing grants. I'm like, why does it surprising? You know what I mean? What about that is surprising? You know what I mean? So there
Right.
clearly is a hang up there for others that you've noted. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting to kind of break down where this frustration around applying for grants comes from. And what we found was it was the repetition, which is what my husband saw with me. So we still found the same thing, the constant copying and pasting the same information over and over again, not being able to streamline. Even if you're using AI wasn't made for nonprofits. And so it's getting your missions mixed up. It's getting your different projects mixed up. If you're a consultant, it's getting your different nonprofits mixed up. So,
Sure.
how do we create a product that really keeps fundraisers and specifically grant writers in mind? And
Mm.
so that's kind of how we got to the product where we're at today. And so it was kind of this beautiful, intricate, kind of, it was just wonderful to see all the pieces come together and get down to the nitty gritty of why people found grants frustrating.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't the narrative building. People love talking about their nonprofit.
Sure. Yes.
Every nonprofit I've worked at, they know I am like their poster child. People love talking about their mission. So it wasn't the writing.
Yeah.
That wasn't the issue. And you'll find that a lot of tools help with content generation. And I'm like, nonprofits aren't short on mission, content, people they serve, storytelling. We have that. And
Yeah.
there are amazing storytellers in the business that if you need help with that, that do that. It was really the death by a thousand cuts, we say, the repetitive nature of what it is to apply for something over and over again, to put your EIN over and over again. And the time suck that is.
Yes. Yeah. I'm impressed by the level of detail and digging in. It's like the psychology of why people were getting hung up. It wasn't that they couldn't manufacture the passion to write. It was the death by a thousand cuts, as you just
Yes.
talked about.
It feels like you would look at a grant and you're like, oh, this is a 60 question grant. Okay. Like you gear yourself up. Like, now let me go find all the answers that match these questions, right? Like,
Right.
how do we streamline that? Like, I know I've already written this 1,000 times. Now, where is it? How do we streamline that?
Uh, very good. Well, I wish you a lot of success with this. Where do you hope Grantyd goes from here?
Yeah, I hope we build out, we're still a small team. And so we have a lot of room to grow and to grow features within the product based on our users. So we're just interested in, we really wanted to take a grassroots approach. A lot of tech, I feel like, can come into the space, even if it's not tech made for nonprofit, and say, this is how you should work.
Yeah.
But fundraisers have been doing this work for a really long time.
Yeah.
So we're really looking to fundraisers and people in the nonprofit space, people who are writing grants, to help us build a product that works for them.
Yeah.
And I think where a lot of fundraisers and nonprofits have a struggle with tech is not very bespoke, but nonprofits are very bespoke. They're made in very particular ways for a very particular group of people in a very particular area.
Yes, definitely.
So even if you have a nonprofit that services, example is youth experiencing homelessness. How it services youth experiencing homelessness in one part of the country is very different in how they do it in a different part of the country. So nonprofits find themselves in this place where they, are tailoring their programming, their mission, how they speak, how they move, their ethics to a very specific population of people. And tech does not do that for them.
Right, right.
So how do we kind of, obviously we're not going to be, perfect for everyone or every situation, but how can we grow and make features that are tailored to nonprofits so they can feel seen and heard and kind of like this idea of, tech for social good, not just tech for tech's sake,
Yeah.
but, tech, I was talking to actually Michelle about, what Patagonia did, this idea that, they used capitalism as a force for good to help, nature and
Yeah,
to, help the environment.
sure.
How can we use tech as a force for good to help nonprofits leverage their time, their efficiency so they can get ahead and make space for more human connection, for more writing, for more mission-based work? Um,
Totally.
versus it just being kind of like, oh, this tech solution I have to use.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, with all the nuance and the hangups that any individual brings to using the tech. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Frankie, you mentioned a few minutes ago about, the importance of community, and you just talked about, working in the social good sector. I would love to just kind of draw the conversation in about another post of yours on LinkedIn where you noted, and you talked about this earlier, when you were leaving Clark Atlanta University to become Grantyd's CEO and co-founder. Um, I loved this part of your post, and I'll read the quote here, um, and then would love to get your impressions on, how the variety of nonprofit missions experiences that you've had has been a benefit to you at this point in your career. So you wrote, quote, "For years, I've had the privilege of serving incredible institutions, HBCUs, arts organizations, and nonprofits dedicated to human services," end quote. And first of all, I'm struck by just the wonderful diversity of the nonprofit verticals you've worked at. Um, I've only been in mostly higher education and healthcare for a little bit of time. So I'm always intrigued by people that can navigate and work in different sectors. That itself is interesting. Um, and how do you feel that wider lens of how different sectors within the nonprofit world operate, how that may benefit the impact you hope to make with Grantyd, please?
Yeah, I really do see us all in the nonprofit space as this under one umbrella. And I think that that does serve us in the tech side. I was talking to another tech founder who really focused in on alumni relations work
Okay.
and was hoping to kind of branch into, as he said, nonprofit work. And I was like, he was like, I'm in education and I'd love to branch into nonprofit. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I was like, in my mind, education is nonprofit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're already there. And so I think, you know, seeing the different sectors has always been just an asterisk for me, but the mission work is mission work. And
Yes.
so I feel like that really has, helped me when it comes to how I, approach Granted. And honestly, I would say it's even less, kind of how I've hopped from different nonprofit orgs. What actually has struck me with Granted is the amount of organizations. I've been surrounded by fundraisers my whole career, the amount of nonprofits that don't have fundraising teams. And
Yeah.
that's where I saw we could really fit in. I was like, oh, wow, there's this, we did a webinar and we kind of took the breadth of, not, we talked about nonprofit IRS data. And when you pull the nonprofit IRS data, all the nonprofits are in there. Everyone with a 501c3 is in there.
Right.
But we did it on a platform that a lot of fundraisers attend, and we talked about smaller nonprofits, 2 million and under. And I remember some of the people in the webinar was like, "That's not a small nonprofit." They're like, 8 million is considered a small nonprofit, and I was like, "Yes, for a fundraiser, 8 million is considered a small nonprofit." But for someone who doesn't have a fundraising team, has
Totally.
never had a grant writer, a chief development officer, really grassroots. For the person who's the executive director of a food pantry, who's the janitor, who's the operations manager, the
Yeah.
grant writer, their budget is 300K a year. That is a
Right.
small nonprofit. And so that's really been kind of my biggest eye opener. I feel like being in fundraising and being around so many fundraisers, I've seen all the different kind of sectors and verticals in that way. But I think I was unaware of how mighty small nonprofits are in
Oh,
this
sure.
and the work that I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, oh, this is who Grantyd is. I mean, it's for everyone, but I was like, this is who Grantyd is for. The
Yeah.
people who don't have a team,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
people who need to get ahead and do not have the same bandwidth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. I recently spoke, and I haven't aired the interview yet, but it was a guest in North Dakota, Western North Dakota. She's the executive director of the North American Bison Discovery Center. And just she seems to fit sort of what you were just describing, Frankie, where the executive director who does the marketing, who does some curation of the displays, who brings in, VIP guests, who does some grant writing. I mean, just wearing multiple hats and working, 60 plus hours a week.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a very localized, special niche nonprofit. They actually have bison on site, and they work with
Oh,
like the local food industry to give the bison meat to people in need. I mean, it's so I think people like her come to mind as you're talking about these really small nonprofits.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and even other, we think about organizations who don't even have their 501c3 yet. They're
Yeah.
fiscally sponsored, right?
Yeah.
You know, I recently went to the National Children's Alliance, and thinking about all the children's advocacy centers that are in rural communities
Yeah.
that do not have, fundraising, and even when we think about it, their CRMs are PayPal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they don't have a grant management solution. They don't have a robust CRM. They're using, they keep all their grants in Google Drive in a folder on their desktop, And so like, how can we provide all of these people tech solutions that, can bring them with us? They don't have the same major gift portfolio.
Right. Yeah.
Planned giving, they're like, I what? So it's just, I'm really passionate about making sure that they aren't left behind, because when we talk about community work, they are the ones boots on the ground
Yes.
doing that work, serving those people in their community. They're so central. And I told someone the other day, I was talking to someone, I was like, you don't even realize how many nonprofits you come in contact with a day
Yes.
that are
Yeah.
doing community work. You don't even realize they're a nonprofit.
Absolutely.
And so it's completely moved me to be on this side, and to I was already moved by mission work, like that's my work. I mean, I like give to every nonprofit I've ever worked at. I give to all my friends' nonprofits. I actually don't tell my husband. Like I love fundraising. I love mission work. And to be on this side is just giving me he's giving me more appreciation for a whole new world of nonprofit.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing those sentiments. This next question it's another side of nonprofit. It's the leadership involvement side. And I know that you are the current chair of the Black Artists Dance Collective. And what would you like our audience to know about the collective itself and how you became involved, please?
Yeah, so the Black Artist Dance Collective was started with some people I went to high school with here in Atlanta.
Okay.
I'm here in Atlanta. But I went to high school with them, and one of them is currently on Broadway. She's in the cast of Hamilton and the ensemble, and the other, he is the chair of the ballet department at Marymount Manhattan,
Wow.
which is in
Okay.
New York. And they had this idea to kind of bridge the gap for, high school dance students
Okay.
who are trying to make their way to college and be professional dancers. In Atlanta, in Georgia specifically, even though we're a major city, we don't have a dance conservatory. We do have colleges with dance programs. But a lot of them are minors. I think we just now started getting some majors. So we don't have a huge, robust educational dance community outside of our wonderful grassroots studios and organizations who do the work. But kind of that college preparatory aspect,
Yeah.
we're lacking a bit in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so it really served as that kind of prep program for high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors to get them through college. And we actually have a college week and everything. It's a wonderful program. So you can find the Black Artist Dance Collective online. It's also TBADC. You can find them online. They're a wonderful organization. They do a summer program every summer where they help, young black dancers get to the college prep program to become professionals, just like the founders are. And so I've been on the board now for this is my last term. I'm rolling off as the chair, but forever
Okay.
will support. And then I also used to be on the board for Berklee College of Music as well, the Boston Conservatory at Berklee. And so as a board member there, so I'm very dedicated to arts organizations and making sure I push those along. And then I also serve on the board for AFP Greater Atlanta, and I'm the co-chair of the Diversity Fellows program.
Wonderful, man.
And
You
I love AFP. I'm a huge fan.
Where do you find the time, Frankie? That's amazing.
Look, that's why my term is ending because I'm like, oh, I'm a founder of a tech company now, but forever will support.
I do think it's interesting, because at least now, as I'm, listening to you, there are at least two instances in your professional and personal journey where you and others working together have identified a gap in the process. With Grantyd, we've covered that. You've covered that really well. And now about the Black Artists Dance Collective, where you're recognizing that there is no real delineated process to get from the high school to the college level to um, professional dance, and just the impact you can make, by identifying where the gaps are and launching initiatives to plug in that gap. That's really remarkable.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's what people in nonprofit do. They see this, kind of glaring moment where like, oh my gosh, I have a solution, right? And your brain
Mhm.
starts to work. Um,
Yeah.
Oddly enough, actually, my husband's not a nonprofit, and he saw that just plugging away. But even to that point, I was, telling someone, because our tool auto populates your nonprofit's information in the grant application.
Mm.
Someone said, "Oh, you're going to take my job." And I said, "Well, as a grant writer, you're already streamlining your work with copy paste by even doing that.
Yeah.
That's streamlined because of a computer. Before you were handwriting your grants, right? And so this is just the next step in streamlining it. Your credit card autofills. Oftentimes
Right.
your resume on LinkedIn autofills. And
Yeah.
so why haven't we taken that to the place where it's needed most? The urgency of nonprofits is high.
Yeah.
Your need to buy something on Amazon for your credit, that's not as high. That technology exists there. And so it's like, why in these urgent spaces do we have this gap, right? And so
Yeah.
being able to, find where a gap exists in a space that it is the need is high and forever growing in nonprofit.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Remarkable. Thank you for sharing that. We have about 5 minutes left, Frankie, and this is our last question here. it's a bit of a mouthful in terms of a quote to get to the point. Um, but I've had one or two other guests talk about this, and as I put together your questionnaire, I thought, given the dual roles of, a performance artist, social impact leader, this may be something of interest for you to talk about. So the quote is from a psychologist, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, a Hungarian psychologist who popularized the concept of flow. And in an article in 2022 in The Atlantic, the writer Derek Thompson quoted um, Mihai, and that the article's title was "Your Career is Just 1/8 of Your Life," which sounds a little frightening. Um, but he remarked that, quote, artists and other professionals feel happiest when their body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. And the best kind of work is voluntary. It's something you choose to do, and it's also difficult. And so that's the end of the quote. And given your career and life experience, how do those sentiments resonate with you about it's a voluntary effort that moves body, mind? It brings a lot of contentment, happiness, something you choose to do, but it's also difficult. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that really does come up for me
Mhm.
more so than ever now as um, a founder of a nonprofit tech company.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, Nonprofit, like I said, it's, and fundraisers, we've been doing this work a long time. The work feels very human and personal and organic. And it's, it's, I'm definitely having to stretch myself
Mhm.
coming into the space in a new way as now, a tech company, something that is very foreign to the nonprofit space as far as, even fundraisers who do use tech, it's not part of their when you think about fundraising, tech is not what comes first, right?
Sure.
It's kind of just, I have to use tech, right? And so coming into the space and trying to align with nonprofits and align with fundraisers in my personal self as this grassroots organic person, while also like demonstrating this tech tool which can feel very cold and feel very like what, even I remember when my husband showed me when he first pitched the idea, I remember thinking if that could work, you know what I mean? Like kind of almost mocking this idea that it could even be a thing, because in fundraising, you're so used to grit. You're so used to like late nights, putting in the hours. Like it just feels like that's the work, like that's part of it, to make it hard.
Yes, yes, yeah,
Tried and true, you know what I mean?
yeah.
And so when I used it for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh. And so I even have people now when we demo, one person said to me recently, they're watching the demo and they go, either this is really great or you're a great salesperson. I'm like, well, you're watching it. So it is great. Like, and I remember even someone else was like, presuming this works. I was like, right, as you're watching the demo, like, so it's a stretch for me to try to help fundraisers wrap their head around automation, to kind
Totally.
of wrap their arms around tech. That doesn't feel natural to them. you know,
Right.
we're people. Fundraising
Yeah.
is human work. It's
Yes.
human work, and that's why I really push like using tech as a solution to make room for more human work, not as like the enemy of human work. But that has been a stretch for me to kind of be both, to be
Sure.
this fundraiser, to be this grassroots person, and also now be this like tech CEO. That feels, I'm like, I feel like kind of like a baby deer. I'm like, I'm getting my footing, I'm getting my words. But it is stretching myself. But I do love it. I love seeing, we had one of our beta testers was the CEO of a nonprofit, or not the CEO, the chief development officer of a nonprofit organization here in Atlanta. And she lost her grant writer and
Oh,
she was launching her first ever gala and she was using our beta version.
oh,
And she
wow.
was like, oh my gosh, I was able to get through this gala and get my grants done because I was doing the beta with
Oh,
Grantyd.
wow.
And
Wow.
to see that happen,
Yeah.
yes, that's it.
Yeah.
What we to see. And, but again, it's pulling them in. It's like, this is how we can do this together.
Right. Yeah. It's not intended to be threatening. It's not inherently threatening. I think
Yeah.
people just you mentioned the tried and true method and like the shop worn work yourself to death.
Yes, yes.
And
Which I
then
get. I get. I'm a tech founder now, so I'm too doing that.
but for the prospective clients to see the wisdom of, okay, this is not a threat. This is not going to XYZ with my particular job. I'm not going to lose my benefits. This is actually going to help really
Yeah,
streamline the work and be much more efficient. And man, we
yeah,
could use that. So my
yeah.
hat's off to you.
I mean, and that's them stretching themselves too, right? To
Yes.
welcome in something new, a new process, a new solution. But I really do see us, Canva, I talk about it. Canva made it possible for anyone to make a flyer.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's like, how do we make it possible for anyone to apply for a grant? How do we make a
That.
mountain into a molehill? Because
Yeah.
funding shouldn't have to be this far away, gold pot at the end of the rainbow. I have to go on this long journey. No, no, funding shouldn't have to be like that.
Yes.
And so, yeah, how do we make it accessible? How do we make it ethical, accessible, and equitable?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great mission in itself. I'm so
Thank you.
energized by what you've identified here and launching with Grantyd. And I wish you all the success with this, Frankie.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
I really enjoyed talking with you today. Thank you. And to give you the chance in this format to share more about your career story and definitely to direct people in our audience to where they can find out more about Grantyd. So thank you for making that introduction at the beginning of the conversation too. So when we air your interview, I'll also put links in the comment section to Grantyd and where people can find more about it on the website and also on LinkedIn because I'm excited to help do my part in spreading the word.
Yes, thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Yeah, my pleasure. And for our audience, you can find Frankie's conversation in People in Fundraising across various platforms later this summer. LinkedIn, with a link to the YouTube AV portion of our conversation. Podbean, where you can listen just to the audio only. There are people in the people in fundraising world that prefer just the audio, and that's totally fine. And with appreciation for my 100th guest, Luis Diaz of WISE and the Donor Participation Project, he is sponsoring my new website, peopleinfundraising.wordifysites.com. So, Frankie, those are all the places where your interview will be aired, and you're welcome to share it as you see fit as well. And I'm excited to share your conversation at that point.
Oh, amazing. This has been great.
I've appreciated it. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
You as well.
Thank you.